Well, we've made it to Friday, the 12th day of November, 2021. Thanks for watching and listening to the Day Weather Podcast. It's being brought to you by the good folks at Chugwater Chili. Go to chugwaterchili.com. Take advantage of some great early discounts. Christmas is going to be here before you know it, folks. Get your orders in as soon as you can. In fact, this week, you get 15% off of all gift baskets at chugwaterchili.com. A great gift idea, especially for that cook in your family looking for something different. As we take a look, more wind, I'm afraid. Windy conditions on the plains, occasional snow showers in the high country. Really, more than anything, it's going to be the wind that you're going to notice the most. There'll be some snow showers at times in the mountains. There might even be Saturday night and Sunday morning a few rain or snow showers in the plains, but nothing more than you'll notice than the wind, as northwest winds aloft will continue. It's going to get downright mild Monday and Tuesday. In fact, there's a little sliver of southwest winds aloft that'll bring warmer air from the deserts in briefly Monday and Tuesday. Then next week, folks, I think is going to be very similar to this past week. Starts off mild. The middle to the end of the week gets colder as another fast-moving front comes out of the Gulf of Alaska and west coast of Canada and races through the northern Rockies and plains, bringing another round of colder weather. Doesn't look like a big storm. Then things are happening up north. What does that mean for us in the long term? Well, we're going to give you sort of two different scenarios of what may unfold here at the end of November into the month of December. But things are getting really, really interesting in the higher latitudes, and we'll show you what we're seeing and why it could have some impacts on North America, Canada, and the USA in the coming weeks. Today's satellite photo shows a nice big swirl of clouds. You can see the swirl of clouds goes all the way from the East Coast back into the upper Midwest here. Pretty potent winter storm for the upper Midwest and south central areas of Canada, into Manitoba, into parts of Saskatchewan and Ontario, then across the northern portions of the Great Lakes and northern plains here. As this cold air and this stormy weather heads over the Great Lakes, thing to remember, this doesn't affect us here in the Rockies, but it's an interesting little weather fact. That is, when you are in the fall season and you first see these waves of cold come over the Great Lakes, which are still warm for the summer, this is when you start to get the lake effect snows. And you can see along Lake Michigan here, and then also places like Buffalo, along Lake Erie, you're going to start to see some pretty significant snows. The UP of Michigan as well. And look at snow getting all the way down into the Appalachians in the northeast United States. Winter, folks, is kind of creeping in. Not dramatically, but sort of creeping in. And look at all this snow falling in Canada. This is important. You put snow down in the prairie provinces of Canada, this time of year, it isn't going to melt. And that makes it easier for Arctic air masses to gain momentum. As we take a look at the upper level pattern, here is your low over Wisconsin. High pressure, a broad area of high pressure is starting to push into the west coast. So the west coast is going to see a drier period of weather here into the Great Basin as well. But there's a little ripple right here that's going to come up, over, and down and through here Saturday night and Sunday. And that's going to keep us in a brisk and a strong northwest wind aloft. And there it is. There's that little wave. So Saturday afternoon, the Saturday night, there's going to be some rain and snow showers along this area right here and up into the mountains with more wind on the plains while the high pressure ridge stays just off the west coast. Here is the next system poised to come in as we get into the early parts of next week. And there it is. This is by Monday afternoon. We have a pretty potent front coming into Washington and Oregon. This looks extremely similar to what just happened this past week. This will swing through Tuesday night and Wednesday, probably form another storm around there as it comes through. As we showed you in the graphic yesterday, La Nina jet stream winds are strong. They tend to be more flat before they go into and have some undulations. And so it's more of a flat jet stream, which means fast moving systems that don't turn into big storms, but keep the weather busy and unfortunately keep the weather quite windy. This is what the precipitation looks like through Monday. There's going to be more snow up here in the Dakotas and Minnesota, eastern Montana as well. And then that onshore flow gets the Cascades and the mountains of southwestern areas of Canada, the Panhandle of Idaho, up into the northwest mountains of Montana. But you can see not as much as you get in the mountains of Wyoming and Colorado. Then look how dry it is in this area right here. This is what the snowfall looks like through Monday afternoon. over the next 3.5 days here. This is the wind gust pattern through Monday. These are peak wind gusts between now and Monday. You can see the worst of the wind is for eastern Montana and the western Dakotas here. Very windy conditions right under that jet stream. And then look up here in north central Montana, some really strong winds and pretty stout winds along and east of the divide into Wyoming and Colorado and up over the higher terrain. So be ready for the wind. Now let's talk about the northern latitudes, the areas up to our north, and how this may play a role as we get to the end of November and into early December. What I'm showing you here is the 500 millibar chart, what the pattern is looking like at 18,000 feet in the northern hemisphere. So it's a little hard. I'm throwing a lot at you here, but here's the United States right here. As you take a look over here, you can see that here's Alaska right here, and then you're back over to Asia, then over to Russia over here to kind of give you a point of reference. Where we really focus our attention during the course of the winter season is this area right here, because this is what really is going to dictate whether or not we're cold, warm, wet, or white, or dry. What we see out in the Gulf of Alaska and out in the North Pacific is a really big driver in what happens with our weather pattern. Wherever you see blue here and gray, it's really, really cold. Where you see warmer colors such as yellow or orange, the air masses are warmer. What's important in this map is where high pressure ridges are, such as this, a ridge like a mountain, and where the troughs are, like one right there. So if we were to draw a line of ridges and troughs across the northern hemisphere, they're all connected here. We've got a lot of waves forming, but in particular, by the end of next week, some of the long-range modeling is predicting that over the Aleutians here, western areas just west of Alaska here, we have a high pressure ridge developing. And you see all this blue here in the Northwest Territories, the Yukon, eastern areas of Alaska here. This is some really, really cold air on our side of the globe right here. Really, really cold air. If this high pressure ridge does form, not saying it will, but if it does, basically it's like opening a door. Swings right open, and this cold air has access to the lower 48 states. Now this is one model, but for the same time, I'm going to show you another model. This model has the high pressure ridge, actually you can see it right here, but it gets cut off by this system right here. And if that high pressure ridge builds but gets cut off, then what it does is the cold air can get to the US-Canadian border but stays more north. So it's almost like a coin flip. I hate to say this, and you hate to say this as a weather forecaster when folks are trying to plan and know what's coming. It's an either-or situation. Either we're going to continue to be windy with these fast-moving cold fronts at the end of November and early December, where you don't really get big storms, but you have lots of little ones and you have lots of wind. And yeah, it gets chilly, but it doesn't get really cold. The other scenario is this one. The cold air pours out of the higher latitudes into the lower 48 states late November into the month of December, and then what we talked about in our long-range forecast that we put on YouTube is that, well, the tendency we're seeing is that colder air is going to have a chance, several chances to move south. So we have one of these situations that you're going to want to watch very carefully in our podcast next week. Will we get this ridge building here, opening the door to Canada, or will we get this situation where, yeah, it's still busy and colder, but not really, really cold? We live and die in the winter by what happens right here, and if there's a ridge here, we go into the fridge. So stay tuned. This is what temperatures look like by Tuesday of next week in Alaska. We're starting to see some negative 30s show up for overnight low temperatures by early next week. So we know the cold air is going to be there. It's just a matter of, will that cold air have a chance to move, or will it stay bottled up? The stratospheric warming event that we have been talking about in December is still showing up. This is textbook cold for the lower 48 states if we see the stratospheric warming trend right here that pushes the cold air off the higher latitudes and further south. So we'll put a question mark on it here, but things are starting to get, well, very, very interesting in the long term. Here's a look at temperatures relative to average by Monday the 22nd. See all the purple here? These are temperatures minus 30 below normal. That doesn't mean 30 below, but it means 30 degrees below average. If you're 30 degrees below average in British Columbia, the Northwest Territories and the Yukon, and many areas of Alaska, that is really, really cold. So the question will be is, will the cold air come south or will it get directed to the east? So stay tuned. Now, one thing, when you look at gas prices, propane prices, heating oil prices compared to where they were earlier this week to where they were a year ago, if you were to look at those things that we're seeing now, and if we do see this colder weather develop, as we get to the end of November, December, January, and February, it's going to be a very, very interesting energy situation across the United States, Canada as well. Canada, folks, is looking really, really cold this winter. At least the opportunities for some long periods of cold up there is looking likely. Thanks for listening and watching the Day Weather Podcast. Have yourself a good weekend. We'll see you on Monday.